The Society of Medical Evangelists will address three groups of Seventh-day Adventists in relation to the call to move out of the cities. The first group represents many Seventh-day Adventists who, after years of hearing the straight testimony to leave the cities, have finally come to accept the fact that the call to move out of the cities is of divine origin, but they have not decided to leave the cities. Why? They are deciding to decide. In other words, they don't seem to understand that deciding to decide to leave the cities is not equivalent to an actual decision to move out into the countryside. Also, this group of Seventh-day Adventists do not seem to realize that having a strong desire to move out of the cities is not the same as making a choice to leave the cities, so they never really leave. However, they have made just enough half-hearted attempts to occasionally seek out country property in order to keep the desire to move into the country alive, but this is as far as this vicious cycle goes. Year after year, these failed, inconsistent, and uncommitted attempts at supposedly looking for country property are merely adding up to self-righteousness and self-deception. This first group is really dragging their feet, procrastinating while their hearts goeth after their covetousness. They are a stumbling block to the church and especially to their very own family members. The second group of Seventh-day Adventists, after much indecisiveness and wishy-washiness, actually came up with a plan to leave the cities. They finally decided to leave the cities, and they did, but how? Some have barely moved out of the cities, and others have moved so far away from the cities that the divine counsels to move out into the country have been misrepresented by these to mean solitary confinement or isolation. Those who barely moved out of the cities are strong at justifying their half-hearted, incomplete move with the argument that at least they are no longer dwelling in urban density, but in suburban sparsity. In other words, because it took them so long to make that self-serving move, they feel that they should be congratulated or praised for this incomplete move, which clearly goes contrary to straight testimonies. It is rather an insult to the spirit of prophecy and instead warrants a very stern rebuke. It would have been better if they had not moved at all than to now pitch their tents towards Sodom. My fellow Seventh-day Adventists, we are not here talking about being perfect, but instead about being right. Being half right is being all wrong. In fact, being half right is worse than being outright wrong. We may not do everything perfectly, but we can at least do it right or don't do it at all. Now, Seventh-day Adventists who made extreme moves into the country, or rather, into isolation, went beyond divine counsel, and have, in effect, made themselves apparently useless to the cities, and have literally become preoccupied with their home gardens, etc., only making long commutes occasionally into the cities only when their supplies run low. Preoccupation with their country property leads them to abandon the cities, leaving them unwarned. The spirit of prophecy, for instance, counsels us to move far enough away from the cities, beyond the city limits, also that our country homes may not be surrounded by or be in view of unbelieving neighbors. In other words, if your house in the country is visible to any unbelieving neighbors, you are in violation of the testimonies, and if your country home can be seen from the side of the road, or if your country home is visible to passing traffic, you are in violation of divine counsels related to country living. Also, we are not to move so far away from the cities that it literally takes hours to commute one way, which makes it rather difficult to give the attention due to the cities. What is really tragic concerning those who have actually fulfilled the abstract specifications of the blueprint to leave the cities is that these failed miserably of God's special blessings because their move to the country constitutes abject selfishness and abandonment of those who cannot afford to make the same move. They fail to see the connection and application of the gospel and its objectives to this particular move. The third and final group of Seventh-day Adventists that the Society of Medical Evangelists will now address are those who are honestly and sincerely desiring to leave but cannot seem to see their way out for one reason or another. In other words, they would leave today if the door was open for them to leave. Let's go directly to the spirit of prophecy and quote word for word a direct counsel for this group of Seventh-day Adventists, for there are, indeed and in truth, lots in every Sodom. Quote, "More and more as time advances, our people will have to leave the cities. For years we have been instructed that our brethren and sisters, and especially families and children, should plan to leave the cities as the way opens before them to do so. Many will have to labor earnestly to help open the way, but until it is possible for them to leave so long as they remain, they should be most active in doing missionary work, however limited their sphere of influence may be." End of quote. We want to highlight the last couple of sentences from this quote, found on page 24 of the book Country Living. First, many will have to labor earnestly to help open the way. It is in fact saying that we must do our part in helping to open the way to leave the cities, and not simply pray and wait for God alone to do it for us, or we will be praying and waiting in vain for God to open any door. God is not going to do this all by himself, without our deliberate and practical cooperation. Secondly, but until it is possible for them to leave, so long as they remain, they should be most active in doing missionary work, however limited their sphere of influence may be. The example of Lot shown what it means to be the most active in doing missionary work. Being actively engaged in doing missionary work will be God's primary means to help open the door for his people, just like he did for Lot in Sodom, because we are just too poor to ever work for enough money to bail ourselves out of the cities, even with 2 or 3 jobs. Consequently, if you are most active in doing your own secular work, if you are most active in working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to survive in the city, if you are most active in going to school, then please don't fool yourself, because no doors to leave cities will ever be open to you, simply because you will be too self-absorbed to see the open doors. The only saints whom God can and will deliver out of temptations or out of the cities are those who are as godly as Lot was in Sodom and Gomorrah. Because Lot was most active in doing missionary work, he was able to see the door God opened for him to leave Sodom, because he entertained strangers unawares. How can you tell if you are like Lot, who was a godly person confined to a city he saw no way out of? Peter, verse 2, lines 6 through 8. And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an ensample unto those that after should live ungodly. And delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Is your soul tormented by the wickedness you see and hear day after day in the city, where you now live and work and go to school? If that is not your present experience, then you should question whether or not you are truly godly, because the Lord knoweth how to deliver, not the ungodly, but the godly out of the cities. Yes, the door to leave the cities will open, but only to the godly.